Hey guys, so what's been happening in the hobby this week? Well, this week I thought we'd talk about the value of, I suppose, finishing what you start. And in light of, I guess, the last, little bit of time, we all know that a certain product got released and got sold out by a certain company under, let's say, less than honest pretenses, or at least were very bad at communicating what the real story was, and created a hype or I guess the catchy term is FOMO, which is fear of missing out kind of thing around it. And, people got caught up in that. And I suppose for some, it might have been a negative experience or a positive one, depending on which side of the coin you're on. And I'm not going to try to, put some sort of critique or commentary on the practices of the company itself. That's not really what this talk is about, but it's more to highlight that this type of thing exists, and that it exists within yourself regardless of a company's manipulation. You can be susceptible to these things in many areas of life, not just miniatures, and rather than focus on that sort of outer sort of influence, rather to focus on the inner world of yourself and how you can best, find the best within yourself to move forward in a way that arms you and gives you stronger willpower, right? When you look at something like, like let's say when you're training to get into shape, if you've been out of shape. I've been out of shape and I've lost a lot of weight and got myself into shape. I've been through that journey in my life. And so, I've felt that firsthand, that build-up of willpower to, control those urges, those addictive urges to want to consume or to buy, or, any of these things that give us our endorphin hits, right? Or if you're addicted to sugar, that sugar rush, or whatever it might be, okay? Because those things are all the same as the addiction to buy more models and all that stuff. It's all the same. It's basically irrelevant what the actual item is. It affects you in almost the same way, and the same chemical processes going through your body and your brain are very, very similar. And that's why something like that sort of fear of missing out thing really works on that, right? And that's why companies use it, not just the one that I'm, alluding to. Many companies do this. It's the same concept by anything that's limited or limited release or anything like that. You go, I better go get that now, if it's something that you like. And in most cases, that's fine. But we all know that all of us who collect miniatures eventually succumb to the obsession of collection, right? And it can get a bit out of hand at times. And in most cases, it's totally fine and harmless and no big deal, no worries. But it can be, even in that situation, you can get in a cycle of just never really completing anything. And that might be okay too, but there is real value in taking something through to the end. Just like the experience of, stripping weight and getting into a healthier version of yourself, the value of that experience and realizing the difference between one and the other. And so you can see two versions of life, one where you're in an unfit state and one where you're in a healthier state. I'm not going to say, in that fit, classic idea of being muscled and so on. That's not what I'm talking about, but being in a more physically active and healthy state. That is going to give you a different viewpoint on life. And within the hobby, completing your hobby projects definitely gives you a stronger sense of completion, satisfaction, and stronger will over those urges to continually buy. And so for myself, coming back into this hobby, I've certainly decided to attempt to exert some of that will. So I've recognized my gluttony for this stuff and are now attempting to find a way to diet myself or start training to build that willpower up. And so one of those ways I'm doing is, you've seen it a lot, like a lot of YouTubers and stuff have talked about this, or anyone online. The thing of like not buying anything new for an entire year or things like that. And that's one way you can go about it. Instead, I'm going more for choosing trying it with doing it with a particular army. So that's why I have these Black Kings in front of me. So for this Nurgle army, instead of writing the list, building up, and you can still write the list and whatever else, but instead of buying it all or buying it in large chunks and then slowly working my way through it, I'm only buying it very small portions at a time. And then I'm not buying anything more until that portion is completely painted. And more than that, I'm painting them individually with individual color schemes. I've talked about this before, what I'm doing with this army. But basically, they're all painted one by one. I can jump between the ones that I own, but they're all treated like an individual model. So I'm not like batch painting all the bone on there, then all the green, and then all of this, and then all that. So they all come out. That way I can choose different. You can already see here how different each one of these is turning out, and they're approached like that, like their own piece. Okay. And by doing that, the way to keep it consistent is obviously in the base colors, on the bases that they're standing on, and finally the hue range, like the broad spectrum of color that I'm using. So there's a lot of similar colors that I'm using on each, but in different ways and different approaches, so that I end up with slightly varied and unique looks. Now this works very good for chaos. Doesn't necessarily work well for a lot of armies, but you could certainly condense down your numbers that you're painting at a time, and just spending more time on each one and enjoying the model for what it is and keeping it more constrained. So obviously if it's your first army, you don't want to do this. I think I mentioned when trying this type of technique of individually painting each one and building your army up that way, have that as your secondary project, not your main one, because obviously part of the fun of this hobby is gaming with someone else or interacting with other people, and if you do one by one like this, it's going to take you forever to eventually have a game with them or to interact with others. So obviously you sort of have your gaming army that's done in a more batch way, and then you have this other little project, and this is your way of building up willpower. And so you don't necessarily have to paint them one by one, but the idea is the rationing of your purchasing. So I've only got 4, and I will paint them all, and once they're done and they're all painted, then I will then think about my next purchase, and whatever I buy, it's not going to be a lot. It'll be probably 1 box or whatever it is, and then I will paint all of that. Now that could be one of the battalion boxes or starter boxes that has a lot of models in it. That's fine, but that's going to mean I'm not going to buy anything for a much longer time. And so in the early days, I probably won't do that. What I'll probably do to build up that willpower, I'll just buy 1 more character or just 1 box of Black Kings and paint the 5 that's in that, or whatever it is, or the 1 or 2 that's in whatever box. I won't go and buy like a big box, because I haven't built up enough. It's like going on the bench and doing your bench press and going from 10 or 15 kilos, if you're in the very early stages of weight training, to I'll just put 40 on each side. Well, I'm talking about on each side, right? So putting 10 or 15 kilos on each side, or then putting 20 to 30 kilos on each side. That's a very big jump, and you're unlikely to be able to do many reps, if any at all. And so that's going to be an instant fail right there. You're never going to complete that. So we're trying to ration this and do this slowly and not get overwhelmed by the numbers, and really enjoy, as I said, the process of painting each one of these and getting more value out of that purchase, because I think sometimes that gets lost. And ultimately, that should inform some of your other armies and some of your other choices. It does a whole range of things, really. It's very healthy. I think having a little side project like this, which is just a very rationed approach, I think is going to inform everything else that you do. It will it'll increase your modeling and painting skills on generally in the hobby, and increase your color knowledge, your art knowledge, all that stuff, which is going to help do your batch painting and do your bigger army projects and your gaming armies and whatever else, or even your competition pieces if you're trying to paint for competition and all that kind of stuff. This type of approach does work. And you can even do that as far as, if you were to do this one-on-one thing, you could convert each one and do a conversion challenge where each one of the models is going to be converted individually and different. And you see a lot of Instagrammers and YouTubers that that produce this type of content, especially on Instagram. There's a lot of it's often in 30k stuff, like in Horus Heresy stuff. A lot of those guys, or Grimdark stuff, they love doing like individual conversions. That what's that that Inc 28 or whatever it is, the other movement where they all convert each one and it's all unique. That's another way as a little side project to help push your creativity in a different direction. Just to it's establishing control. Basically, you're setting a more rigorous but also enjoyable practice around and focus on miniature building, painting, and so on, for its own sake, in a more involved way, which ultimately, as I said, is going to enrich your experience in this hobby. And when it comes time to products being released and letting those go by, that's also like if you had trouble with a certain type of food. Like for me, it was when I was first, trying to lose weight and everything, it was pastries. Like I love pastries. Okay, that anyone that knows me back in that day, like I'm a big fan of that stuff, and like things like custard and stuff like that. I love custard, and so for a while when I was like losing weight, I actually had to physically walk to, like if there was a pastry shop coming up down the road, I would have to walk to the other side of the road. I couldn't go past it. I would go in and buy something straight away. Like I like the smell. As soon as I get that smell and those that type of stuff, that sensory thing, I'd be straight in there, because and God help me if it was like a little French patisserie or something, then I'd be lost in there for I'd gain like 20 kilos or something by the time I come out. So and so I have to purposely walk on the side of the road and make very, very conscious decisions in the moment, and realize what's happening and make that choice, and not be so. And that got better over time, and so my willpower grow, and so then I don't have to walk on the side of the street anymore. I can go past it. I can not buy those things, or I can if I want to. And you do slip and you do slide and you go back and forth on this, but overall, my journey, like I haven't gained any more weight. Like all that weight that I had in my early life, it's all gone, and I now fluctuate in a more reasonable range, healthier range. And so it worked. It worked overall. Am I fully ripped, muscled? No, but that's not the point. The point is to get yourself into a stronger sense of control. Just in terms, not in all cases, like we're not robots, but just to help you out in some of those key moments, like when you might have to pay rent instead of buying that box, that's limited release or whatever. Maybe you just say no to that and go and pay the rent, and no, that's not. It sounds funny to say that kind of thing, but there's many of us out there that have foregone real commitments over purchasing stuff like that and gotten ourselves into a bit of hot water. And not just with the hobby, just with other things in general. So, portioning and rationing and focusing attention on a project like this, something similar, something where you're just saying, okay, I'm just going to do this small bit, and when that's done, I'll get the next one. And that doesn't mean that the rest of your hobby can't be, I'm not trying to suggest that you do it with everything, because you're not. You're going to buy other things too. But this is about just focusing on one thing, because what you're going to find is that by doing this just on this one bit, even if the rest of your hobby is madly buying a bunch of stuff or whatever, this is going to slowly affect the way you purchase those other things. You will slow down. You will 100% slow down, and you'll stop buying as much and just constantly buying all the new things and stacking up tons of boxes. That won't happen, because this type of project is far more valuable overall to your hobby, and you will find that it's like 100% true. It's gonna affect everything, and that will then eventually save you money. And that's part of the point of this, as well. Not just from a creative or artistic or whatever hobby point of view. It's also to help you out with like your spending and that sort of thing. And so and you'll be happier with these. I can promise you. By the time you get to the end of your journey by doing in this smaller batched way, the models that you paint out of that will be 100% way more loved by you than any of the other stuff you do, because you'll have spent more time on them, and and you'll have completed them. They're all done. There'll be nothing finished that needs finishing. You won't have a bunch of grey models sitting in a box somewhere. They're all there in front of you and you've completed them. And that's something that we rarely get to say about anything that we do. And that's why I'm saying not to do it with everything. Just pick one project that suits the idea of this. So for me, it was chaos, but it could be anything really. Like for instance, if you're painting an army that has a lot of the same color and painting them, you know, with unique color schemes on each one doesn't work. Like let's say a Space Marine chapter, right? It doesn't really work like that. But you could convert each one and make each one individual through the conversion rather than the paint job, you know, or the base is done, you know, uniquely for each one. You know what I mean? You could put little things on there. You could just spend a bit more time treating the model in a unique way for each of those that you have, because you only have a small number, right? You might have 4, 5, 10, whatever it is, and that number is much easier to control, and you can basically, you start to tell a little story with these things, and that's gonna be so much more fun and interesting. And so scaling down your scope, you know, and you know, you're broadening your imagination, but you're scaling down your physical scope about what you're actually doing. And so that then just concentrates everything down, and you should find a really fun and enjoyable result. Like I certainly love doing this. This has been really, really fun. You know, it's my first, I guess, fantasy Nurgle model back in the hobby, and you know, I enjoyed every piece of this, and I think he came out cool. You know, I'm very, very, very happy. I tried a lot of new and interesting things on this guy, and yeah, he's, you know, I'm very, very happy, and I'll remember that too. Like that's going to be a model that I remember. You know, just like how I'm doing these. I'm like this one here that I'm doing now. Incidentally, these two are tutorials on the YouTube channel if you want to see. But you know, this idea of doing the pale armor thing, that's yeah, I'm really loving painting this. It's super fun, and it's coming out really cool, and I can't wait to get into all the glazing and all the rest of it. So you know, just taking your time and letting those FOMO things fly you by, and allowing that to drift away, because it really doesn't matter. Those things, you know, there'll always be more. There's just so much out there in this hobby bombarding you all the time, and you don't really need to go out and get those things. You know, making more considered choices is going to help improve the hobby that you have and make everything healthier. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on this. I hope that's helped give you a bit of a look in on maybe a strategy or a way you could approach if you're concerned about that kind of stuff, and you do kind of spend a bit, and we all do in some way. But you know, not everyone that's going to be a problem. For some people, that's part of what they like about doing the hobby in the first place, is just the collection part. You know, not everyone is a painter or a converter or that sort of thing. So that's not going to work for everyone. But you know, hopefully it will give you some ideas about how you could build willpower for this, so that you don't go out and just blow your money on the next thing and then sit it in a box for the next 5 to 10 years and never touch it. Yeah. Anyway, I hope that's helped. Please hit the subscribe button and all that stuff if you've liked this. And I guess I'll catch you on the next one.